Lebanon's tragic downfall, often attributed to a one scam, is a symbol of the country's systemic corruption and mismanagement that devastated the economy and society. This scam isn't just a singular event, it's emblematic of a financial scheme that triggered widespread economic, political, and social chaos. This narrative will explore the details of this scam, its mechanics, its perpetrators, and how it spiraled into a nationwide crisis. At the heart of Lebanon's economic collapse was a financial system that operated like a Ponzi scheme. The Lebanese central bank, Banque du Liban, led by long-serving Governor Riyad Salameh, played a central role in this fraudulent system. Over the years, the central bank devised schemes to attract deposits into the banking sector, offering extraordinarily high interest rates on dollar deposits to lure money from Lebanese citizens, expatriates, and international investors. While this system initially appeared to stabilize Lebanon's economy, it was inherently unsustainable. The government relied heavily on these deposits to finance its massive public debt and fund state operations. Instead of using these funds productively for economic growth or infrastructure development, much of the money was siphoned off to cover deficits, pay political cronies, or line the pockets of corrupt officials. 1. Unrealistic interest rates. The central bank, working with commercial banks, offered interest rates as high as 15% on US dollar deposits. These rates were far above market levels and drew significant inflows of foreign currency into Lebanese banks. 2. Circular borrowing. Depositors' funds were lent to the government to cover its deficits. The government paid these loans back with more borrowed funds, creating a cycle of borrowing without actual economic output to sustain it. 3. Pyramid collapse. As economic conditions worsened, new deposits began to dwindle, breaking the cycle. With fewer incoming funds, banks could no longer meet withdrawal demands, exposing the scam. 4. The disguised theft. Billions of dollars disappeared during this process, reportedly through embezzlement, fraudulent accounting, and offshore transfers by politically connected elites. International investigations have suggested that these funds ended up in private accounts abroad, leaving ordinary Lebanese citizens to bear the losses. The scam's collapse triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. When the banking system could no longer sustain the inflow of foreign currency, the Lebanese pound lost its peg to the US dollar. Over the course of months, the pound lost over 90% of its value, wiping out savings, pensions, and incomes. The once thriving middle class was plunged into poverty almost overnight. Hyperinflation soon followed, with the prices of basic goods and services skyrocketing beyond affordability for most citizens. Food, medicine, and fuel became luxuries for many, leading to widespread hunger and desperation. One of the most shocking outcomes of the scam was the collapse of Lebanon's banking sector. Banks imposed informal capital controls, restricting access to deposits. Lebanese citizens were no longer able to withdraw their own money, sparking widespread outrage and protests. The trust in banks, once the cornerstone of Lebanon's financial system, evaporated. People took to the streets to demand accountability, but the entrenched political elite showed little interest in addressing the crisis or compensating those affected. The one scam that destroyed Lebanon wasn't an isolated act by a few bad actors, it was deeply rooted in the country's corrupt political system. Lebanon's sectarian political structure fosters a network of patronage and cronyism. Politicians across all sects used public funds to enrich themselves, often depositing stolen money in the very banks they controlled. This self-serving behavior created a culture where looting the state became normalized, leaving ordinary citizens to suffer the consequences. International institutions like the IMF and World Bank have long warned Lebanon about its unsustainable economic policies and rampant corruption. However, little action was taken to address these issues. The scam also implicated international banks and financial institutions, which facilitated the transfer of stolen funds abroad. This global complicity allowed corrupt Lebanese elites to evade accountability while leaving their country in ruins. While the financial scam is distinct, its parallels to the Beirut port explosion in 2020 are striking. Both events were the result of systemic corruption, mismanagement, and negligence. The explosion killed over 200 people and destroyed large parts of Beirut, underscoring the complete lack of accountability in Lebanese governance. The aftermath of the explosion revealed the same patterns seen in the financial scam. Leaders dodged responsibility, investigations stalled, and the public bore the brunt of the disaster. Together, these tragedies symbolize how corruption has left Lebanon in a perpetual state of crisis. The scam's impact on Lebanese society cannot be overstated. Over 50% of the population now lives below the poverty line, and unemployment has skyrocketed. Professionals, including doctors and engineers, have fled the country in droves, seeking better opportunities abroad. This brain drain further weakens Lebanon's prospects for recovery. The once vibrant Lebanese middle class has been decimated, replaced by a growing divide between a small elite who benefited from the scam and the majority who were left to pick up the pieces. Since the financial collapse in 2019, Lebanon has seen waves of mass protests demanding accountability, justice, and systemic reform. Protesters have called for an end to the sectarian political system that enables corruption, as well as the prosecution of those responsible for the scam. However, the entrenched political elite have resisted these calls for change, maintaining their grip on power despite growing public outrage. This resistance has left Lebanon in a state of political paralysis, unable to implement the reforms necessary for recovery. For Lebanon to recover, it must address the root causes of its crisis: corruption, mismanagement, and a lack of accountability. International organizations, including the IMF, have proposed a series of reforms to stabilize the economy, but these require political will that has been sorely lacking. Key steps include: 1. Accountability, prosecuting those responsible for the financial scam and recovering stolen funds. 2. Banking reform, restructuring the banking sector to restore trust and stability. 3. Economic diversification, reducing reliance on remittances and public debt by investing in productive sectors like agriculture, technology, and tourism. 4. International assistance, securing aid and loans conditional on implementing reforms. The one scam that destroyed Lebanon is a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of corruption and greed. What began as a fraudulent financial scheme spiraled into a nationwide crisis, leaving millions of Lebanese struggling to survive. The road to recovery will be long and difficult, but it is not impossible. By addressing corruption, holding those responsible accountable, and implementing meaningful reforms, Lebanon can rebuild its economy and restore hope for its people. However, this requires courage and determination from both the Lebanese people and their leaders, a resolve that must overcome decades of systemic failure.